All right, hello all, and welcome to this edition of Leadership Fitness Camp. I'm your host, George Anastasopoulos, as always, and today's edition is called Your Price is Not Too High. Your price is not too high. Without any further ado, and by the way, this is a program on sales leadership, so pricing you figured would factor in here someplace, and here it is. And so without any further ado, let's take a look at our objective of today's camp, and this is to go beyond customer satisfaction towards long-term loyalty. The operative word is beyond. We really want to take it beyond customer satisfaction because that's like the price of admission. And it's much more important to go beyond that. So the first thing you want to ask yourself is, what's a customer? And so I'm going to ask you now to pause this recording and reflect on that question. What's a customer? Take a minute or so and just think about if you were to define it, how do you define a customer? Pause this recording, and then when you're done thinking about it, take about a minute or so, unpause it, and let's continue. All right, welcome back. So what's a customer? You probably came up with a variety of different thoughts. Some of you may think that a customer is somebody who pays our bills and buys stuff from us. It's somebody who we have a relationship with. It's person that has a need for which we can find a solution. Anyway, there's a variety of ways to look at what a customer is. Well, here's one for you that I'd like to propose for your consideration. That a customer is someone whose success and development depends on interactions with you. Bit of a different twist, but you've come to expect that from our camps. Someone whose success and development depends on interactions with you. Suddenly paints the whole idea of a customer relationship in a different light, doesn't it? Let you think about that one and absorb it over the course of the balance of today's camp. Remember the golden rules, page 42 in your workbook if you're following along. The golden rules, what are they? Well, the customer is always right. We've always heard that. And we hear that a lot. And so when in doubt, refer to the above. The customer is always right. But there's another golden rule, and that is that the customer is not always right, but they are always the customer. As I was told by a boss of mine many years ago when I was a young salesman, he said, so do you want to be right or do you want to get the sale? And of course, the answer is, well, I think I'd rather get the sale. And so the customer is not always right, but they are always the customer. Or choose the top rule. The point here being, it doesn't matter which of these two rules you choose one and live it in your actions and behaviors. Page 42 of your workbook if you're following along. I want to share a couple of concepts with you in the time we have here together, but another 10, 12 minutes or so. And the first one deals with this thing, what I call the commodity black hole. And commoditization leads to greater price sensitivity. And commoditization, by the way, happens in a heartbeat. There used to be a time a bunch of years ago where you could create an innovation in the marketplace, and it would take normally your competitors years to figure out how to duplicate and or build on it and improve it so that they could take that advantage away from you. Well, not anymore. Now it happens and seems in like micro minutes or something. So as soon as somebody comes up with some form of innovation, then somebody copies it in a hurry. So the idea being the commoditization, in other words, if I view your product as being similar or identical to that person's product, then really the differentiator is price. And therefore, price sensitivity kicks in, and that's when it becomes much more sensitive, that is pricing, when you have commoditization. And of course, differentiation is the great differentiator. And so whether it's innovation, in other words, my product is new, exciting, different, or whether it's differentiation, that is, my product is different in this way, and how you speak of it, those are the things that create differentiation. And differentiation, in addition to innovation, the two are not necessarily the same, is a differentiator. Page 42 in your workbook if you're following along. How do you differentiate? A couple different ways. One is by adding value. And the other one is by innovation. How do you add value? It's got to be something that's meaningful to the customer, and it distinguishes you from the competition. And it doesn't need to even be a big thing. It just needs to be meaningful to the customer and distinguishing you from the competition. You know, I've seen too many companies that, add value to their products or services, and they are expensive value adds. They are potentially time consuming and or consume a fair amount of resources in order to add this extra value for perhaps very little increase in price, and so they lose money on it. But don't bother to ask how meaningful this is to the customer, where in a lot of cases, what's meaningful to the customer could be something really small to you and not cost a lot. The other way to differentiate is through innovation. And that's when you stay one step ahead of the competition, something that's new, it's improved, it's better, it's simpler. Did you hear what I said? Simpler. What a shocking concept. It's bigger, it's smaller, it's convenient, etc. As a matter of fact, I'll use an example. Coffee machine. My wife and I finally threw out a coffee machine that we had bought easily 30 years ago. And it's been on our counter off and on over the years for some 30 years. It came back again, and it got a lot of use over 30 years, by the way. But it came back because our previous coffee machine, which was consistently more expensive and really a very complicated, sort of coffee machine with a lot of digital uh, uh, elements to it. You had to push different buttons in different sequences to get cleaning mode versus strong mode versus bold mode versus timing. You want it to start at a certain time, end at a certain time, turn off at a certain time. I mean, it had so many permutations to it that quite honestly, I couldn't figure out how to use the darn thing. And of course, it broke down in like very short period of time. And so we finally, we brought out our tried and true old coffee machine, which had a switch on, off. That was it. It was simple. It worked. Finally, we retired it to the great coffee graveyard, coffee graveyard in the sky. But my point being that simpler is actually better. And however, in the world of innovation, we seem to think that more is better, and it's not necessarily always the case. The second concept I want to share with you here today is this concept of your prices is too high. Not because it's an objection, by the way, page 43 in your workbook. It's an objection all of us in the world of sales will face. So when the customer, the prospect, complains or kicks back to us and says, hey, your price is too high, what are they really saying? And my argument to you is they're saying probably one of three things. They're either saying, one, I don't have the money. I don't. It's like your price is too high because I just don't have that much cash, man. So I don't have the budget for it. What's the solution to that? Well, customize your offering. So, if you happen to be selling Mercedes Benzes in a showroom and a customer comes in and you say, yeah, this vehicle, well equipped, is $75,000, they go, wow, your price is too high. Are they saying I don't have the budget? Well, then they probably should have been shopping someplace else. So customize your offering. Offer them perhaps a used vehicle that has some mileage on it that they might be able to get for, say, $30,000 or $40,000. So customize your offering. I don't have the budget is the first translation of the phrase your price is too high. Here's the second. I don't believe it's worth it. Now, by the way, most customers never actually use that phraseology. But it is the second reason or the second translation to the term, your price is too high. Essentially, they're saying, I don't think it's worth it. What that means is they need more information. You need to give them more information to explain the value, to explain the benefits, what's in it for them, and really why the price is the price. And by the way, if you happen to be selling Mercedes-Benzes in a showroom, they're always talking about their technological innovations and how superior this is and superior that is. And oh, by the way, it's a Mercedes, eh? And so they're leveraging the brand. They're constantly talking about the value and the benefits so that your objection of your price is too high just doesn't happen in a Mercedes dealership. It happens in a Honda dealership, but not a Mercedes dealership. Isn't that interesting? At least not as much. And when it does, it's because they're comparison shopping other Mercedes and other dealerships. The third possible translation to the objection of your price is too high is that, well, I'm cheap, but I want the Mercedes. Well, this is a person who's generally transaction oriented and has a win-lose bargainer approach. In other words, they want to get a really cheap price, but they want the high-end thing. So to them, it's all about them winning, and whether you lose or not is immaterial to them. That's a bargainer. It's transaction oriented. I mean, quite honestly, my suggestion to you is direct them to the competition. Let them worry about them, because they are way more. These are the customers that are way more trouble than they're worth. 3 translations to the term "your price is too high," and none of them have anything to do with the fact that your price is high. And so next time, especially for those of you who are in the service industry and are wondering how to price your own services, your price is never too high based on all of these things. If the customer turns you down, it's because they don't have the money, the budget. It's because they don't believe you're worth it or the service you're offering is worth it, in which case you better do a darn good job at describing exactly what's in it for them and the value and the benefits they get. And of course, the third group that says, I'm cheap, but I want the Mercedes anyway, you don't want to deal with them anyway. The next concept I want to share with you is this concept of transaction or interaction. This is Usain Bolt, who is a record-holding 100-meter and 200-meter multi-Olympian. He's got more medals, I think, than God. And he essentially is the fastest man on earth. And everything happens in about 9.5 seconds as he dashes down the track. Because you see, that dash down the track is the moment of truth. When he is preparing, just like every other runner, before that moment of truth, he has his game face on, he's listening to music, and you'll see the athletes each have their own sort of style and way of getting into the right mind frame before they actually put their feet in the blocks and then listen to the gun that will signal them to dash. and some of them will be, like looking and smiling at the camera. Some of them will be totally in their own headspace and not even acknowledging there's another human being on the planet. Some of them will be jumping up and down. Some of them will be very quietly sitting in the corner. Each one has its own approach, but the point is, it prepares them for a moment of truth that lasts under 10 seconds. Page 43 in your workbook, by the way. Every time you touch another human being, especially a customer, is a moment of truth. In his book, Moments of Truth, Jan Carlson, who was the former chief executive officer of Scandinavian Airlines, one of the most reputable airlines in the time. Now, this book is quite old. I think it was written in the 80s or 70s. But nevertheless, he had a simple philosophy. He said, every time you touch a customer is a moment of truth. You want to surprise, you want to delight them. And by the way, they had 100 or more thousand touches every day. Every one of them was a moment of truth. If they do just a 5% better job in half of those in terms of delighting the customer, because it's a moment of truth, what an impact on their business. And it was. And so if you're viewing a transaction, which is when you're in the process of doing something with a customer as a transaction, then it's not really a moment of truth. But once you slip into interaction and you recognize and have a mindset that this is a moment of truth, then many wonderful things potentially can happen. And the last concept I want to share with you during our camp here today is this concept of time frame, short versus the long-term time frame. You see, a transaction focus is on the near term. It's what I want to get now, right? So let me get the sales now. This is what's important to me. So if you've ever, you can see this in evidence. If you ever go to a car dealership on the 30th of the month, what's the first thing that happens is some salesperson assaults you literally with an offer to buy something today. Did you bring your checkbook? I hope so. And so that's very much a transaction focus because I got to do it now. And so if you have too much of a focus on the near term, you will have a bias in your conversations with customers that will have a very transaction flavor to them. Make sense? Whereas interactions focus on the longer term. They avoid urgency. They have a fuller understanding because we have the time. We focus on the longer term. We're not affected by the fact I got to do it now. That's urgency. And so it allows us to have a fuller understanding of customers, their needs, successes, failures, the business, industry, trends, developments, all of those things that you see on your slide here. Because having that appreciation and understanding of those things about our customers, or just getting to know them better, allows us to have more strategic, more conceptual conversations about the products, the services, the solutions you're offering, the opportunities, and of course you can do them in a jointly identified and created fashion, page 44 of your workbook. So if you are either trapped in or deliberately trying to get the sale now, you will be very transaction focused. Whereas if you put a little less pressure on yourselves, you may find yourself interacting more on a longer term and having these kinds of interactions and relationships with customers. And so bringing it to a close, your action plan, as always, I'd like you to spend a moment and write down before you leave here. You can pause the recording if you like. What's different about you now that I've taken you through this camp? What you will do next? And then write these things down. And then tell 3 friends and an accountability partner. And your homework, very important, is how are you demonstrating your loyalty to your customers? Secondly, on a scale from 1 to 10, transactions being 1, interaction being a 10, where are you? Be honest with yourself. And then what are you going to do differently to maybe move the number up 1 or 2? And then thirdly, I strongly suggest, because this is your homework, is to submit a 1-page report on what you've learned here today, how you are now different because of this, what impact you will observe on others, and what's next for you. And on that note, I'll leave you with this pleasant smiling face, that's me, who says everybody wants to buy, they just don't want to be sold to. And so on that note, I just want to say thank you very much for being here at Leadership Fitness Camp, and have yourself a terrific remainder of your day.